Hello, everyone. Welcome to this new installment of Inspiration Information. It's a series that I do on and off about maybe something that I read or seen or listened to and how it's inspired me to actually delve into some records as a result. And this time, I want to talk about the podcast, The Album Years, which is a project by Steven Wilson and Tim Bonus. Both of them are English musicians. Steven Wilson is very well known. I think he was a founding member of Porcupine Tree. He's a music obsessive, a music fanatic actually, and I love listening to him talk about music, especially when it comes to that period of time between like the sort of post-punk years or even the progressive to post-punk years, especially in Britain, because he's a wealth of knowledge. He's gone to a lot of the gigs. He's bought the records when they came out, and he has a true passion for the times that he grew up in. And he was in a band, or he's still in a band, I think, with Tim Bonus. Tim Bonus is a singer-songwriter. He's been associated with different projects, and he's made albums with Richard Barbieri from Japan, and so on and so forth. And him and Steven Wilson formed a band called No Man. And they've been making music on and off for many, many years now. But yeah, so the album Years is a really, for me, a fascinating concept because you take a year of music and you look at all the albums, all the key albums, and maybe some obscure ones that might have come out that year. And so they don't do the years in chronological order either. The last episode was 1998, I think, and the one before that was 1983. Sometimes the episodes are 2 or 3 parts long because there's so many great albums to talk about. Their 1978 installment was like a 3-parter because so many great albums to discuss. And the discussion is very dynamic, it's very entertaining. They know what they're talking about. They have this kind of knowledge and passion that is really magnetic. You want to listen to the podcast. I'd like them to keep talking more and more because it's really interesting. So if you're not familiar with the podcast, and there's something that I really love listening to and sharing with you as the community. And what I've decided to do is to talk about one that I listened to quite recently, which was 1983, which to me is a great year of music anyway. But to just show some of the albums that have prompted me to put on my turntable or to revisit. I'm not going to do a Revolutions installment this week. I think this will be in place of Revolutions. And sorry, my throat is it's a bit strange. Um, yeah, so these are in no particular order. They're just like, as I've looked at them. So there's some albums that they're very passionate about, and it's interesting. They sort of prompt you to revisit the albums just out of their sheer passion. You go, oh wow, that's really, maybe I've missed something if I haven't listened to this properly or something. And case in point, is the Final Cut by Pink Floyd, which is an album which is not an album that you would fetch in the Pink Floyd collection. It's not something that you go for very often. It's basically a concept album that is based on the theme of war. It's very, dour, sad. It's full of lament. It's full of sorrow. It's largely a Roger Waters effort. the whole concept, was born out of his ideas. Uh, it's got very, very interesting and, in fact, stellar uh, David Gilmour soloing on his. The solos are amazing. Um, but I wouldn't say you would reach out for this album very often because it's basically a series of piano ballads by Roger Waters, and it's so melancholy and tragic, and the lyrical content is really hard wearing. So, but they love it so much that I thought, oh, I need to listen to this again because why not? So you can tell the war content is very obvious. The poppy is there. You got the Paranoid Eyes is the track that they talk about in the podcast as being their favorite, and I think it's probably one of the standouts of the album. Another album that they waxed lyrical about, and this time I'm more in agreement with them on this one, is the Brian Eno, Daniel Lanois, and Roger Eno collaboration, Apollo Atmospheres and Soundtracks, which is a masterpiece, really. There's so many great tunes on this. It's probably one of Eno's best releases, really. At least in the ambient series. It has things like an ending ascent, which is the fifth song on side A, which is just mesmerizing. Just has got this mysterious space ambient qualities, phenomenal. And side A and side B are quite different. Side B has got a more. It's funny to say this, but it's more poppy on side B. Deep Blue Day, which I think was on the Train Spotting soundtrack, which is where the first time I heard that track was, is also an absolutely beautiful standout track. But this is atmospheric, obviously. It's spacey. It's mysterious in tone. It makes you travel into space. I really love this track, and they do too. Now, the next two are two of their absolute all-time favorite records, and when you listen to them talk about those records, I mean, I don't disagree. These are really some of my own personal favorites. This album, which everybody should hear, in my opinion, I've talked about this album on this channel before quite a few times, is Ben Watts, the guitar player in Everything But the Girl. This is the album he made before Everything But the Girl, 1983, obviously. He was so young. He must have been like 18 or 19. Before that, he made an EP, which he got Robert Wyatt to sing on, which was remarkable because he was nobody. He came out of, he didn't have any pedigree at all, and he just sent his music, and Cherry Red, the label, accepted to sign him on. Again, it's very brooding, melancholic music. It's got a kind of a bossa nova feel. It's what I would call sophisti-pop, which is this mixture between, folk pop and jazz. It's very kind of, it has a very, very soulful kind of sound palette, I would say. This album is just gorgeous, though, through and through. It's like a quintessential English songwriter record. It's called North Marin Drive, and it's pastoral. It's very English, very bucolic in nature. I love this record. Like on Box Hill, the title track North Marin Drive is a masterpiece. It's just like guitar and piano and just him singing. I don't know. It's. I went to see him with James Buttery quite a few years ago. He played a solo gig and we met him, and he was a really nice guy. And I should have brought my copy of the album to get it signed. James did, and I didn't. Another album that they absolutely love, they're big fans of, is this album, From Gardens Where We Feel Secure by Virginia Astley, which I think is a lovely, lovely record too. And the way to describe it on the podcast is kind of like you know, s- um, what did they say on the podcast? It's like a school piano teacher, you know, if you were like in primary school, and that's the kind of vibe you get from this, you know. And it's true. It's very, again, bucolic. It's pastoral, like as all get out. It's like an English summer's day, you know, kind of very moving very very slowly, and you've got the impression that you're part of some sort of, you can hear the church bells in the distance. It's got this kind of quality of to nostalgic, very. I mean, I'm sure if you're English and if you grew up in that time period, this record would bring you some form of you know it would be a trip back into um, the past, I guess. I was talking about Ben Watt with Cherry Red Records, and Tim Bonus and Stephen Wilson also keep waxing lyrical about Eyeless in Gaza. Don't have any of their albums. This is a compilation which I think is really, really excellent in every way. Cherry Red Classics, the best of Eyeless in Gaza. Eyeless in Gaza, a not very well known band, unfortunately. They are still active. They formed in 1980, and they released a slew of albums. All of them are somewhat interesting. They fall into the post-punk, um, you know, early indie pop, a little bit of kind of minimal wave there, throw it in there as well. Um, it's kind of very DIY. It's very DIY sort of ethos, very stripped back. Um, I love their sound. It's the kind of sound that I crave. They talk about this band a lot, and I just thought I'd mention it to you. Yeah, again, quite beautiful, quite ethereal music. Um, and since we're talking about ethereal music and beautiful music, they also mention, obviously, a favorite of mine, the the absolute must-hear Cocteau Twins, the trio of Liz Fraser, Robin Guthrie, and Simon Raymond. And this marks the arrival of the Simon Raymond being the third member officially. And in the podcast, they talk about this as being a transitional record, which I agree. They will go. They're going from being this kind of post punk band, and moving into being this real ethereal wave band, which they're defining the sound of 4AD and defining the sound of um, you know of ethereal music as at large. I'm fucking speechless. Um, Other records they mention are things like, I mean, and I'm not going to spend 5 hours on this because I've spoken about this record before. New Orders, Power, Corruption, and Lies, which is a masterpiece, I think. Like I did a UK synth pop video, and this was in the 10 records that I've chosen. So, I mean, I love this record. I love Your Silent Face, and Age of Consent. The opening is fabulous. So no need to talk about this too much. Let me just see what I've got. Here's an interesting record that they talk about. Now I don't have the parent record this comes from, which is 9025, whatever the number is. I don't know, but it comes from Yes's Trevor Horn's produced album. This to me is an absolute key record in my life as a listener of music, owner of a Lonely Heart. Um, I it's one. I was born in the mid 70s, so sort of came of age in 1983. I would have been like 8 years old or 8 or 9 years old. This record, this song, I can absolutely remember perfectly, almost like distinctly remember this song being on the radio and what it created, what it generated in me as an emotion. And because when I was 8 years old, I didn't speak a word of English and I didn't know who was on the radio. It took me years to actually work at it with Yes, and I tracked it down. I actually have the CD single copy of this and the original 12 inch. And I don't have the album. I don't have any other Yes records. I do not. I've only got this, and it's a beautiful, beautiful single. Like Trevor Horn, the magic of Trevor Horn on this is I don't know. I mean, the man is a genius. I mean, you just have to listen to his productions. Is he the best producer of the 80s? That's a question that I would ask people. Another record that they talk about, which I love as well, sorry, I knocked into my thing, is Soul Mining by Matt Johnson, also a genius, I mean, in his own right. This is also very steeped in a very melancholic kind of, um, you know, it's a lush production. I love this record. There's, you know, this is the day. This is the day is one of my all-time favorite singles. That little sort of organ riff at the start, uncertain smile, beautiful as well. These are just key records that you can rediscover over a lifetime. I mean, I keep listening to Soul Mining, which is the best of the other albums. Make no mistake. That is just that's it. And I love the cover as well. It's a beautiful sleeve. It's everything. Matt Johnson, I have all the time in the world for Matt Johnson. He truly was a genius. Now another record, a common record that they love and for good reason, is Synchronicity by the Police. Um, Synchronicity is a tale of two halves really. There's one half with uh, like really decent music, um, in fact quite beautiful, but the second half is top heavy with like side two has got Every Breath You Take, King of Pain, Wrapped Around Your Finger, and Teen Sahara, which arguably are four of my favorite Police singles ever. um, all these songs are amazing, like King of Pain, Teen Sahara. What a beautiful song! It's just they're all so incredible. And side A has got Synchronicity Part One and Two, and what else? Um, yeah, Mother, Walking in Your Footsteps, which are all great songs, but side two is, I mean, so like here's the sound of a band in full flight really. And I think, was this their last album, the album before they disbanded, or was it Ghost in the Machine? But things were going bad at that time. But musically speaking, there's a synergy there. Um, they also talk about this album, which I love. It's more an EP than an album, but this is beautiful, really. Life's a Rat with Spy versus Spy. Billy Bragg. Billy Bragg is a London. Well, in fact, he comes from Barking or Dagenham. I can't remember. And I used to be a teacher in a school in Barking and Dagenham, so I know the area he comes from. I live there and I work there, and it's a very working class area. There's a Ford. Well, at the time there was a Ford factory, a huge Ford factory. The kids I used to teach were very, sort of very East London, streetwise types, and you can see there's a real. I don't know. Personally, I can relate to this record a bit more. Um, and it starts with the Milkman of Humankind. So Billy Bragg is kind of like a one man Clash to me. I mean, when I listen to Billy Bragg, if the Clash was one person, if it was just like Joe Strummer with a guitar, it's Billy Bragg. You know, it's got this kind of gritty, but also very poetic, highly poetic, highly sort of sensitive and highly developed kind of sense of for words. A New England is a lovely track. 1983. I highly recommend this EP. It's very nice. Um, Tim Bonus and Stephen Wilson love swordfish trombone, swordfish trombones, and I do too. You know, this is a reminder that English is not my first language. Sometimes I have to fit words in a certain way in my mouth. Um, so you know, Tom Waits. Stephen Wilson's got this theory that it's named Swordfish Trombones as a tribute to Trap Mask Replica because he argues that this is kind of like the direct line from Captain Beefheart. And I agree. I really do. There's a very Beefheart like quality to this music. When you think of the music he made before that, you know, it's very romantic, very melancholic, very, you know, sort of piano bar type of, you know, jazzy, sultry kind of. If you listen to Blue Valentine or you know, A Small Change, these kinds of, or Nighthawks at the Diner, they're very sort of um, there's a sense of sadness of, and this, no, this is kind of, it's wild and crazy, and there's all sorts of brass instruments and crazy lyrics, and I mean Shore Leave, Underground, you know, Frank's Wild Years, the title track, you know, Gin Soaked Boy, what an album. Um, an all-time favorite of mine, like really like a teenage album, you know, one that I listened to 100 million times, War by U2. I know this album back to front. I mean, I just, this album is meant so much to me at a time in my life. Listen to it, and I can see myself exactly at, you know, age like 15 or something. I can picture it in my head. Every song is, for me, is like on this. It's like I'm connected to every song, and the song that maybe I'm connected the most to is probably Red Light for some reason. Um, Red Light, I think, is beautiful, but 40, the last song, the last track, is magnificent. I think U2 these days, there's so much, you know, like what they're doing is so far away from what they used to be, and but if that stops, say like after 4 or 5 albums, let's just say they've gone to the Joshua Tree, you know, they would be viewed as this kind of, you know, iconic cult, but they've, I think, Bono is just a bit too annoying these days. Um, Another album that I talk about with very much fondness is The Hurting by Tears for Fears, which I talked about in my Gimme 10 synth pop. I love this record too. I think it's my favorite Tears for Fears record. If only for Pale Shelter and Change. I just change. I just love, and but Pale Shelter is peak Tears for Fears for me. It's beautiful. A couple more. Um, the Fantastic Chameleons, The Script of the Bridge, their first album. They're a band from, I think they come from Manchester or Greater Manchester. Um, Mark Burgess was the leader. They they had this brand of gothic post punk. Like the first 5 songs on this: Don't Fall, Here Today, Monkeyland, Second Skin, Up the Danix Escalator, Less Than Human, are 5-star songs. They're amazing. It's like the A side of The Teardrop Explodes, or the A side of Steve McQueen by Prefab Sprout. It's top quality, absolutely amazing. And the last one that I'm going to talk about is Dazzle Ships, which is a total musical UFO in OMD's discography. They went from this synth pop and really poppy band. If you listen to architecture and morality, is very kind of it is avant-garde in some respect. Like you got song Sealand and Joan of Arc and all that, but you know, in effect, it's still pop music. This is not pop music. It's it's like it's if I don't know. It's like a very avant-garde driven brand of synth pop. Um, if you listen to Radio Prague or things like Telegraph, you've got the impression that there's some tracks on say OK Computer which are sonically or in texture very similar or very reminiscent of that, or even things like um, I don't know, Aphex Twin. Some of the sonic soundscape you get there is um, yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And if you don't know what a dazzle ship is, it's a it's a warship with a painting on it, which looks like this, which is supposed to divert the if you're aiming at a ship with a rocket or whatever, it's supposed to confuse the shape of the ship, so it makes it harder to hit. You Peter Saville artwork, beautiful. So I'll stop here now. I hope you enjoyed this installment. As usual, just leave me some comments and talk to me, and I will be very happy to interact with you. Take care, everyone.